We now come to the explain questions, and as ever, all three of the explain questions on the foundational Catholic theology paper are going to be phrased in this way. Explain from either Catholic Christianity and Judaism or two Christian traditions, beliefs about, and in this case, its creation of human beings. Now, before you begin to answer this question, the first thing that you need to do is decide which direction you're going to take your question. Are you going to deal with it from a Catholic and Jewish point of view or two Christian points of view? Now, for this question on human beings and the creation of them, realistically, it doesn't matter too much which direction you take your answer in. But whichever you do, my advice to you is to make it really clear to yourself which direction you're wanting to go. So I'm going to talk about two Christian traditions. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to cross out that bit there for no other reason than just as a bit of a prompt to me. And then in this space here, I'm going to write RC for Roman Catholic. And then here, I'm going to write fund for fundamental Christian. Now, again, you can perfect your own little codes, but I think you can't really make it any more straightforward and simple than I have done there. We then look at how we are going to answer these questions and what paragraphs are going to look like. So we're going to start with the Roman Catholic. So we're going to start our paragraph with firstly, to show to ourselves and allow us to be able to see as we move through. So firstly, Catholics believe humans were created by God, because they do, so you've got a mark there. They believe they are made in God's image. Margot Day. And this is because St. Augustine teaches that God created the universe out of nothing, which is ex nihilo, and humans were the final and best part of his creation. Now, at this point, you could, if you wanted to, talk about how St. Augustine bases his teachings on the story of Adam and Eve, and that the church understands that in the modern era that the story of Adam and Eve is symbolic for the creation of humans, and that the world was not made in 6 days and God resting on the seventh. But because it's just an explain question, I would stay away from that, because then you are going to run the risk of turning this into an evaluation question and move away and beyond the demands of the question, which ultimately will waste a lot of time and not particularly gain you any marks. Now, from this, you can do a second Catholic paragraph and talk about how, secondly, Catholics agree with evolution. Now, you have answered earlier on in the paper the key term question for what evolution is. So you can borrow that content from that answer and duplicate it. So explain what evolution is, and then use a couple of quotes really. So we then explain what evolution is, and then make it clear that Pope John Paul II supports this when he states there is no conflict between science and religion. Now, obviously, as I've said, you'd want to talk about evolution in a little bit more detail, but I'm not going to spend time on that. If you want to see what I'd write about evolution, go and find the video where I've answered the key term question earlier on in this series of videos. At this point, I've got 4, maybe 5 marks, but no more, and I'd be topped out at that because I've not done the second religious viewpoint. So I'd have to move the paper down. And then finally, and using firstly, secondly, and finally is a really helpful tip for the exam because it allows you to make sure that you've gone through enough paragraphs and also for you to signpost to yourself and ultimately to the examiner when your answer is drawing to a close. Finally, fundamental Christians believe humans were made by God exactly as described in Genesis 1. And it's at that point here that you would go on and you would talk about the 7 days of creation and humans being made on the 6th day. And when God made humans, he said that they were very good. Again, it's really important thinking about what I've said up here, that by leaving Adam and Eve in Genesis 1 down here and not mentioning it up here, it prevents the risk of losing marks for repetition of content. And it also prevents me from ending up writing an evaluation question, which I don't need to write. First paragraph about St. Augustine and that we are made in God's image. Second paragraph about agreeing with evolution. And then finally, your fundamental Christians believing that we are made exactly as described in Genesis 1.